the way you do it. You play the guitar on the MTV. That ain't working. That's the way you do it. Money for nothing and your chicks for free. Now that ain't working. That's the way you do it. Let me tell you, them guys ain't dumb. Maybe get a blister on your little finger. Maybe get a blister on your thumb. We got to install microwave ovens, custom kitchen delivery. We gotta move these refrigerators. We gotta move these color TVs.
Wow. I'll go ahead and fade that out. Oh, man. Welcome to PacaCast, episode 10. We are doing Joel Berry economics. This is what we're going to be talking about tonight. I don't really have much of an outline, other than just kind of what I saw was going on. So bear with me. What started the burrito dialogue? The dreaded burrito dialogue. Where did it all come from? Well, I guess it started with Andrew Clovett and Matt Walsh and grocery prices. Everything's insane. They're still rising. This is a big problem for the Republicans heading into midterms. It's a bad reflection on Trump that promised to curtail inflation. You know, there was a degree of election promises that were wrapped up in the economic outlook and affordability for average people. And the feeling on the ground is that these election promises have not been lived up to. And so, people are starting to notice that this is a talking point that needs to be addressed by the admin. But some people choose to live in denial. So the usual suspects, Joel Berry, Ben Shapiro, the Normie Khan, those guys, they all came out in favor of what we're calling the $20 burrito. And he says, last night, my wife made homemade burritos for our family of 8, and it cost less than $20 total for everybody. I'm beginning to think the affordability crisis is really an I don't know how to cook crisis, which I'm going to go ahead and push X to doubt. My wife gets grass-fed from Aldi and Costco. Stretch the meat with refried beans. So, Joel Berry is, I think he has like 6 kids. There's 8 people in his household. So he's buying grass-fed beef from Aldi, which I doubt. I mean, Aldi's great. My personal and professional life is somewhat intertwined with a lot of wealthy people, and I just don't think Joel Berry goes to Aldi. Like, I could see his wife at Costco doing a run. She got the Amex ready to go, but Aldi, I don't know. And then we stretch the meat with refried beans. Like, when are you McDonald's? Your water, you're gonna dilute your beef consumption with oats and filler. It's just the whole idea is absurd that you're feeding a family of 8 burritos for $20. Maybe, but I don't know. And it goes on. I've said some wild things on this app that drew an insane amount of rage, but none as much as when I tell 20-somethings to try to cook at home instead of ordering a gourmet burrito in its own dedicated gourmet burrito or dedicated burrito taxi. So Joel Berry is attributing any feelings of economic unhealth that Zoomers and millennials and primarily Zoomers are feeling is attributable to their DoorDash and Uber Eats habits. You guys need to lay off the Chipotle deliveries, guys. The reason we talk so much about rising prices during Biden is because he gave us record inflation. Trump all but killed the inflation. Well, prices always rise. Well, the goal is to make them rise as slowly as possible and make wages increase, unless you're rooting for recession. Well, we shouldn't gaslight people who are actually struggling, but there's 2 deeper issues. Gratefulness and perspective were always the cornerstone of the right, along with a can-do attitude. Bootstraps. Got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And overcoming in hard times is in our DNA as Americans. DNA? Joel Berry. I'm reasonably informed by you that anybody who appeals to a certain principle, or a certain creed, some list of I guess, doctrinal statements that agree with the Constitution. Anybody who's on our soil and has the same DNA as Americans, and we're now into biological determinism. Overcoming struggle is in our DNA. It's the left that traffics in self-victimization. Yes. Okay. But what if the grievances are real? I wonder if George Washington had these guys, the founding fathers are out there meeting in bars and getting together in Philly, and they're like, hey, we're gonna write this letter to King George. We have a bunch of grievances, in the course of human events. And there's Joel Berry in the corner, as they're going through the list of grievances, they got their Joel Berry in the corner saying, disagreeing, wow, yeah, that's leftism. You can't say that you have a legitimate grievance. That's leftism. he has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. No, that's leftism. The king might have abdicated, but you got to have a can-do attitude. You just got to pull yourself up by his bootstraps. But Joel, he's forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent could be attained, and when so suspended he has truly neglected to attend them. Yeah, but the king will get around to it eventually. We just have to keep our heads down and putter along until the situation improves. He's dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness in his invasion on the rights of the people. What rights? I mean, do we really need rights? The monarchy said that we don't need rights. I don't think we need rights. It's just endless coping. So the $20 burrito became a thing, and it is now the cornerstone of conversation. Now, one thing, there's two questions that I wanted to answer tonight. One, what is real economic criticism and what is not? And then the second question is, what can you do about it in your own life? Right? Because that the second question is the one that ticks me off more, because there seems to be this knee-jerk reaction among people where if you try to give universalized kind of financial advice that is tangible and actionable and relatable to a wide swath of people, there's always one guy that comes in and will broadly proclaim his exception to the rule. And it's like a wild one-off circumstance. Who knows if he's lying or if he's misrepresenting the facts or discounting his own, choices in the matter. But he'll come in and say, your advice doesn't work for me for XYZ reason. And so, your entire outlook is discounted. And it's like, you didn't account for guys that have two fingers on their left hand amputated. I can't play guitar for Manchester Orchestra anymore. So I'm not going to take your financial advice. And what that serves is like this demoralization thing. And there is a lot of that going on. And so there's some of the grievances are real. I'll caveat. I won't even caveat. The grievances are real. Some of the perception is incorrect in like where the ultimate source of the grievance is coming from. But the grievance is real. People are feeling the economic effects of a century of bad economic policy, bad monetary policy. The government kind of walking lockstep with industries across the board, and it's been a disaster. And people there's chickens that are coming home to roost now. So there are legitimate grievances. People don't necessarily understand them, nor do they lack the ability to really articulate them in a realistic fashion. So it gives the appearance of kind of spurging out about it. Doesn't discount the fact that they're talking about something that's real. But the demoralization does tend to take away personal agency. And I think it was like RN or Jay or someone was talking recently about how they hate that word agency. It's corporate speak. Agency means your ability to act. You are an agent. You are an actor in, like, your life isn't just fate and Calvinistic determinism. Like, you do have agency, and it's a sliding scale, right? Like a quadriplegic is probably going to have less personal agency than someone that has all of their limbs working and intact, right? Like, you're not gonna, if someone's wheelchair starts rolling down a hill and they get hurt, you're not gonna blame them and say like, you should have hit the brakes. But likewise, if you are a healthy person, if you are of reasonable intelligence, if you are moral, and understand that actions have consequences and there are virtues and vices with behavior, I don't know. I think there is a level of responsibility. You cannot account for the entire system as it stands, but you can account for your own actions and your own ability to navigate the system. And that's more or less what I am concerned about with the second half of this question today. So where do we end up? Well, most of the 30% of the inflation happened during the pandemic, and that's kind of true. Over 2 years, food inflation has been around 3% annually. The first thing from an economics lesson, inflation is a rate. It is a rate of change. When they say it has been around 3% annually, that means it's still going up, right? Prices have not come down. They have gone up. So if you had a period of significant inflation followed by a period of lesser inflation, that is not a stabilization, a rediscovery of the prices. The prices continue to rise. They just rise at a slower rate. There's a lot of people with a lot of advanced degrees and a lot of books behind them in their profile pictures that don't seem to grasp this simple concept. If inflation rises quicker than wages, people feel like they have to pay more for things because they can't afford them as easily. So there's a premise here. I'm kind of done with Joel Berry. I don't really care. But let me resize this here. Oh man, this is gonna be a whole thing. Hold on. Oh come on. How do I? There it is. Okay, we'll go there. So this is Fred. Is a good tool to kind of try to visualize this. So this is the personal consumption expenditure excluding food and energy. Okay, so we're not looking at food. We're just looking at the cost of everything that isn't your groceries, your eating out, your gas bill. You know, the gas it takes to put in your car. Everything that's outside of food and energy. And the reason that it's good to kind of look at this is because food and energy are more input dependent, right? So they have more variability to them. Say if your president goes to war with Iran, oil prices and oil futures have a significant amount of variability in their pricing. If you have a bad crop in Ukraine because the entire field, like wheat field, is covered with fiber optic cables and you can't get a combine out to get the wheat, you know, there's more variability to food prices. Now, variability's gone down over time as we've kind of stabilized some farming practices and developed input verticals with, you know, nitrogen fertilizer and glyphosate, weed killers and stuff like that. But these are two of the more variable. So this is everything outside that. And you could see that a purchase that was like $16 in 1960 will now cost you $130 today. That's just how it works. And there's periods of higher inflation, like the 80s and 90s. There, you know, the lump is a little bit bigger and then it kind of smooths out, and then we hit COVID and it continues to rise. And the thing about inflation is it is something that doesn't happen immediately, right? A lot of this was COVID, some of this was tariffs, right? But as businesses begin to price in the additional costs of their inputs, say during a period where the global logistics system is shut down because of COVID lockdowns, those prices are not going to adjust immediately. They're going to adjust down the line. I picked a couple other ones. This is the overall rate. You know, in 1970s, we had significant inflation during the Jimmy Carter administration. And then here you can see the spike after COVID. So what I wanted to show you too was that this is just this rate translates onto this graph. Does the line ever go down? Do prices ever go down? Have we tried deflation? Has it ever been tried yet? No. And there's a lot of it. There's a lot that's built into this. Part of it is, you know, currency debasement. Part of it is spending and input costs and all that. But most of it is just our financialized economy, where we need to continually inject through mechanisms like quantitative easing. We need to inject liquidity into our massive economic system. And it's not just the US. We need to inject money into the global economic system like we're doing with Japan right now. Japan's currency is having a crisis. And so the US is going to try to bail them out. And the fact that we cannot service our own debt means that they will continue to print money and they will continue to inject liquidity into the system, continue to try to sell treasuries. And, even regardless of what the Fed even does, money continues to be printed in the market by banks lending. Every time you buy a car, there's a transaction. There's you paying the car company in cash and they giving you a car. But to be honest, like most people buy a car on credit. So what happens? Well, the car company gets money from the bank gets money from you, and the bank charges you interest. Where there's a ledger item that is being manufactured within that transaction. So in terms of, I guess just to kind of run through it, the strongest defensible version of a thesis that says Gen Z men are economically worse off rests on two primary facts that hold up under scrutiny. Number one, young men without bachelor's degrees earned a median income of $45,000 in 2023, which is roughly 22% below the $58,000 inflation adjusted median income of their generational counterparts in 1973. So people with a bachelor's today, graduating college, going into a job, they are earning 22% below the inflation adjusted earning of their parents when their parents graduated school. Now, if you compound that with the fact that the price of college has skyrocketed due to administrative bloat, to admissions being given out to everybody, the credentialism built into our system, people are paying for that in debt. So not only are you most likely you are starting a job outside of college, making less than what your parents made when they graduated college, but you will also have 5 to 6 figures of debt tacked onto it that you cannot claim bankruptcy from. You cannot escape that debt. That debt follows you your entire life. You are going to pay it. Unless there's some drastic change politically, there's nothing you could do to get out from under that debt. It exists. They can, there's a lot of stuff that they can do that's real bad in terms of interest rate adjustments and that sort of thing. You can defer the debt, but you will pay it, and it will continue to generate interest. And so already, just graduating college, the economic picture is worse. Objectively, it's worse for Zoomers that are trying to get established. And then consider the fact that the dating market's so chuffed. Your parents probably got married in their early to mid 20s, and the dual income that having two parents working, if two people are making inflation adjusted $58,000, well, that's $116,000. It's a lot easier to afford a house at $116,000 a year. Even if your mom decides to drop out of the workforce when she has kids and become a stay-at-home mom, you've probably already made considerable down payments on your house. You probably, are not paying PMI. There's a lot of economic assumptions that you can build into whatever hypothetical you want. But the bottom line is, they had the advantage of cheap college. They had social systems in place that made the dating market work. They were getting married earlier. They were making more. And these are all real, tangible things. And the second biggest complaint, I think that is valid, is the national home prices rose from 60% from 2019 to early 2025. So the Harvard, home prices rose 60% from 2029 to early 2025, while median household income rose only 22%. And that's according to Harvard JCHS. Young men overall, and especially college-educated white men, raw income comparisons actually favor Gen Z on the numbers, but the inflation-adjusted numbers go the other way, especially when you compare for what you were trying to save to get your life started as a young man in 1970, in 1980, 1990 versus today. Even me, I got my start as an adult in the 2010s, and we graduated college. I got a pretty terrible job My first job out of college, I was making $35,000 a year. Within 3 years, I had a couple of promotions. There was a compensation adjustment, and I left that job making $43,000 a year. My wife was doing about 22 a year when she finally dropped out of the workforce. But we were still able to, interest rates are so low, money was so cheap that we were able to afford a home when we purchased. And then, we could talk about the rest of that during the personal finance side, but I'm not immune to to understanding that the financial situation is more bleak for most Zoomer white men now than it was when I graduated college. And that's not that long of a time period ago. So I ran numbers. I did a couple sims and worked through some of the reporting agencies like BLS and all that. The bottom line, I think that's really important, is there's not really good data that gives you demographic information, economic information, and geographic information. There's no and that's an area. It's like it's like how everyone knows implicitly that there are a lot of false classifications, ethnic classifications when on booking information, like on county jail mugshots and stuff. Like there'll be a guy named Habanero, Gutierrez, and he'll be listed as white, or like Emilio Mufasa, and he'll be listed as white. Similarly, there's a lack of curiosity of study in understanding geographic and demographic interplays with kind of a macroeconomic study. So the data is kind of scattered across a couple of different things. There's some cross correlation that you can do. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, nor the census really took that and ran with it. But regional household income, according to the census for West Coast people, the median household income was $88,290 for the Northeast. It was about $86,000 for the Midwest, $81,000, and for the South, $73,000. And the amount of expenditure from those is the Northeast, or the West and the Northeast, are the highest spending households in the country. There's different places. Obviously, you're kind of forced into a choice from a economic perspective. Do you live in a city where it is very unaffordable, but you have access to networks and jobs that are going to set you up in a career more effectively? Or are you going to live in a podunk area and, rip and claw trying to make ends meet? So if you look at places like New York, the typical home value in the state of New York is $708,000. The home value in the New York metropolitan area is $708,000. And the typical rent is $3,500 to $3,700 a month. Rent is 40% of median income. In Los Angeles, it's worse. The homes start at $950,000. Rent, a lot of LA is rent controlled, but you end up with around somewhere between like 60% of the median income going to rent. I think the more convincing analysis isn't necessarily the cost of living, because the boomers are going to point to like Jimmy Carter and gas lines and 14% interest when they bought their first home. There's a lot of number manipulation. The best one, I think, is home price to income ratio over time. From even as early as 1985, a home price was about 3.5% median income, and then running into 2025, it's 3.5 times median income, and then running into 2025, it's 5 times median income by national. But if you look at the metropolitan trend, New York and Los Angeles is about 12 times the median income for the price of the house. New York is about 8 times. Chicago is about 4. Austin, 4.7. Austin is 4.5. Dallas is 4.4. Phoenix is 4.3. Atlanta is 3.9. Houston is 3.6. Columbus is 3.4. And Pittsburgh is 3.1. And Pittsburgh is a good spot for people that are looking to live in a city but also get started. There's plenty of desk jobs and reasonable careers out there. But the number 2 is colored by the fact that if you want to have a reasonably priced home in a city, you're probably going to have to plan to enjoy the benefits of diversity and liberty. And the average home price is going to incorporate a lot of, half of the average home prices are probably going to be in neighborhoods that are not the most desirable. Now, for younger guys, you guys have some wiggle room with that. Like it's probably going to be a few years before you have kids that are going to start school if you're sending them to public school. And so, there's plenty of time to plan for that eventuality. But if you're trying to get into a spot, live in relative comfort and build equity, there's sacrifices that are probably going to have to be made on that. The other thing that gets talked about a lot is labor force participation. There's student debt issues. There's NEETs, which are the lowest form of human, and are mostly comprised of non-white people. Trade and vocational, there's ways to set yourself up with a decent median, commensurate median income without having to go to college. For example, like cooks and truck drivers, electricians and carpenters, you can quickly go from, something to 47,000 to a decent 6-figure income if you're, working your way up through the union to master, or you get into or are competent enough to get networked into a position where, you have some demand. But men now are only 42% of students at a 4-year college, and white men still have the highest degree attainment among the races. But you're not just competing with other men; you're competing with women too, and that causes more issues with the dating market. The last thing, I'm sorry, I'm getting stun locked by all this, by the data. So the single most defensible steelman of a thesis that young white men have it economically worse is that Pew found that young men without a bachelor's degree earn 22% less in real terms than their 1973 counterparts, and even as degreed men earn more than ever. So for people with higher than a bachelor's, it's 77,000 median. It's significantly less than what their generational cohorts were when indexed for inflation. Incomes are generally flat, I guess. What the pain point is mostly coming from is the housing prices and the rent prices. You guys are paying a higher premium on purchasing homes, a higher percentage of your raw income going into purchasing homes, and a higher percentage of your income in rents if you decide to rent. The problem with rent is just it's an endless black pit of money that you pull into. So the whole idea with rent from a financial planning perspective, as was taught to me by my parents, was that if you're renting, you can pay significantly less than you would for a mortgage, and then squirrel as much money away to save up for a down payment for a house. It doesn't seem to be the case anymore. There was, while interest rates were really low in the early 2020s, or 2015 to 2020, before COVID, there was parity with rent prices and mortgages, but now as interest rates are probably going to continue rising, it does seem like the mortgage option is a little bit out of reach for people that don't really plan and budget well. Gen Z spends, so the avocado toast meme, the $20 burrito meme, the you guys need to stop Uber Eatsing meme. It's a lie. So Gen Z spends a smaller share of income on essentials than prior generations did. And that includes, food and dining and that sort of thing. And then there's, sorry, I lost my place in my notes. Give me 1 second. All right. So there's two, there's like three things, I guess, that we can run through real quick. There are the official data relies on CPI, which uses like hedonic quality adjustments. And this means that the government assumes that because a new car has a backup camera, it isn't necessarily more expensive if the price has doubled. If a young man, for a young man, a $40,000 car is a significant debt load. And it's not really a quality improvement if they are intentionally taking away cars that are more affordable. So if you can't, there was a few years ago, I told the single guys in our little group, like, you guys need to be investing in a cheap square body, 4-cylinder truck, single cab, bench seat with a stick shift on the floor. And you go pick up the girl, you got the golden retriever riding in the passenger seat, and he's already buckled in. He's got a seatbelt on. So the girl has no place to go. Then in the middle, saddled up next to you, and you're driving around, you got your hand out in front of her, manipulating that stick shift, and it's doing all sorts of implications. Crank windows, AM, FM radio with a tape deck that you have an aux cord plugged into. But the auto industry has obsoleted. They've stopped even making manual cars. And even if they were making them, they're not less expensive. So there's not feature creep. There's not new and wonderful technology in cars. It's technology that they've been slowly rolling out and, doing micro iterations on for decades while, they're making obsolete like all of their more budgetary friendly options. Now, there's a little bit of an implicit bias in some of the data. It ignores the hidden tax of credentialist systems. A degree today is not worth as much as a degree in the 70s. If you had a bachelor's degree in the 70s, you were doing real well. My mom paid for her bachelor's by waiting tables and working as a lifeguard in the summer. Paid it in cash. So degrees are significantly more expensive, and they're worth significantly less because everyone has them. They don't really mean anything. And we're seeing that even filter up into post-grad degrees where, medical schools are selecting for people with MCATs that are, in like the 50th and 60th percentile, entirely based on their skin color. So there's not really like entry-level jobs now. There's nothing where you can go in out of high school as a clerk or something and effectively apprentice within a trade. Everything requires some sort of credential now. And even when you get the credential, you get the piece of paper that says you have a bachelor's of science. There's going to be a lot of places where it's like, well, do you have 5 years work experience? Because we're really trying to hire an H-1B. So we've built in a significant amount of unreasonable expectations into this job description for the explicit purpose of ensuring that we don't, have to necessarily hire the first competent white guy that comes along. And then the reports suggest that, there's a little bit of a crisis in terms of moving and locality. There's a network effect. So economic life, career advancement, mating markets, social capital, it's concentrated in cities where the cost of living is most exorbitant. And telling a 22-year-old man to move to a Rust Belt town where there's no professional upward mobility or suitable social demographic is not really an economic solution. It's kind of exile. And we're left where the cities are overrun with criminals and with immigrants and foreigners, and they don't have any sort of like culture that's recognizable to America, except, again, I'll advocate for, I guess, Pittsburgh. I think it's still a decent place so far, but it's bleak. There's this great dispossession that's happening, or the illusion of income. Nominal wages are up, but functional purchasing power for a life foundational assets, so housing, land, energy, marriage-ready stability, they're at a multi-generational low. Contrast that against the 1970s single earner homeowner versus the 2026 dual income rent burden. And even if you were, able to afford a house on a single income, or, similar to what your parents started off with, it would likely be a house that was built when your parents were starting off and would have significant amounts of, required capital to maintain and repair. There's this notion of a degree fork, where, if you're equalizing for degrees held by boomers and degrees held by Gen Z, incomes are actually stable. What's really affecting it is the lack of college credentials or degrees that don't particularly matter. So you end up with a fork pattern where like you have the boomer high earners and the Gen Z high earners that have like equitable degrees, but the people without the special degrees are doing more poorly. It's just not true. The net lifetime earnings are kind of more important than that. And so even if you end up in a position where you start off well and you're making consistent money, you're making good money, you start off at a job, it's like 75 grand, you're doing great. You like it. You're an auditor at Deloitte, or you're, I don't know, pick a desk job. You're a sales associate somewhere, doing the same thing that your daddy did when he got out of college, making a good living. You're ready to get moving on. Well, the thing was, like, daddy didn't have to compete with the entire planet for his job, right? And there wasn't this employment culture where, employers had a nested shareholder value in minimizing their workforce to skeleton crews. So, your dad could work for the same people and get promoted once every 2 years. He gets a new title, gets a nice, considerable 10-15% pay bump, and it was fairly consistent if he hit certain metrics. And with you, Gen Z, the only real way to substantively increase your income is to job hop. The highest earners are the people that work for 2-3 years, maximum 5 years, and then they leverage their whatever credentials they were able to obtain in that time to get something new. There's not really like a vocational ladder anymore. There's not really a career. There's the financial instability has kind of instituted a mating tax. There's no situation where a man can realistically start a family on median income wages in a city where rent is $2,200 a month. The median age of first-time home buyers against the median age of marriage is a good kind of data point. I don't have that chart in front of me, but it shows the obvious that the median age of first-time home buyers now is like almost 40, and the median age of marriage now is mid-30s or early 30s, and that shows like there's something wrong, right? It's symptomatic of a greater issue. There's something wrong in the economy, in the social structure, in the incentive structure that is making things worse, just generally, regardless of whether or not you're capable of pulling yourselves up by your bootstraps or not. So I guess the transition here is inflation is probably not the cause of your issue, at least not inflation writ large, right? Especially if you are one of the high percentage of Zoomers who is now doing resale trading. If you had a Robinhood account that you started in 2020 or 2021, that account is probably worth, significantly more than what you put into it if you just bought market funds and held, because inflation also increases the value of your stock portfolio. So there's kind of ways to mitigate inflation, especially on like everyday purchases and that sort of thing, if you're savvy enough. But the big items, the home prices, the rent prices, the concentration of capital within cities, the dissolution of any sort of coherent society and social structure, a culture that doesn't really have any incentive to lift up youth. Like everything in our culture is specifically geared around keeping boomers alive at this point, right? Keeping them alive and maintaining their standard of income. I don't particularly know why. I guess they're still one of the larger, if not the largest, voting demographic at this point. But every malady that we have in society is specifically geared towards like red line, go up, keep boomers happy. So there are things that are causing it to appear as if Gen Z is economically worse off than the boomers or Gen X or even millennials. Now, I do want to transition to, what do you do about it? Because that's more important to me than what can we do about the economy. Like, ending the Fed is not going to fix your problem. And frankly, I don't really think there's a whole lot of people out there with the power to end the Fed, if anyone. So what do you do? I understand the purpose of Twitter. Twitter is a place for the complaints, the stream of conscious, the ranting, and I obviously engage in that. But it's important to be able to compartmentalize within your own life and identify the things that you have control over. What can you do? So I will give you my story, and I will caveat it by saying I was probably as an elder millennial, I'm probably the last chopper out of Saigon at this point, in terms of the economy, because I was able to graduate. I told you guys I had a $37,000 a year job out of college, and the reason I got that job was because I tried to start my own business doing stuff, and turns out it's really hard to start a business as a 21-year-old and like make and be successful at it. It's even harder when your parents are ready for you to move out and get an apartment. So I ended up getting a full-time job. Within 3 years, I'd gotten like 2 promotions. Some of that was meritorious. Some of that was due to staffing issues where they had nobody else left. And the only way they could really cover the position that was vacant was to promote me. And then the first thing I did was leverage my new title. I got a LinkedIn DM back in the day when LinkedIn was actually useful. And I responded to the DM. I got an interview with HR and then with the hiring manager. And at this point, I think my annual compensation was like 43. And they asked me, they were like, on the interview, they asked me, what do you want to make? Or what do you make now? And so when someone asks you, what do you make now? What that question is asking is, what are you looking to be making if they hire you? So I doubled what I was making at the time. I told them, I'm making 85. I'd like to be making 90. And they said they could make 90 happen. And so I took the job, obviously. I got a counter offer from my employer, and they were not able to match even close. They're like, well, we can raise it to 70 and give you like a one-time bonus, but but please stay. I did not stay. And this job was one where, I was making base, and then I got a commission for extra revenues that I was able to bring in. And that's how I escaped the working class. I got a job where I could be compensated based on the amount of input and success I had individually within this corporate environment, I found success and built up my reputation. And at the time, when my first child was born, we had a house. It was about 800 square feet. It was an old house, built in the 50s. We had put a little bit of money into it to fix it up because there was some stuff that needed to get fixed. But we bought it from a flipper, and so the stuff that needed to get fixed was stuff that he did wrong when he flipped this house to us. There was leaking in the basement and all sorts of problems that we had to deal with. But we dealt with it, and we thought, well, incomes are going up. We don't want to drastically change our standard of income or of living because we want to save. So let's go ahead and we'll find a house that's larger because we do have a growing family and we want to have more kids. So let's find something else. And that translated into us selling and doing the whole McMansion suburban neighborhood thing for a little bit. But in that sale, between the time we purchased the house and the time that we sold the house 3 years later, with a little bit of effort on our side in terms of like sprucing the place up and fixing some stuff that needed to get fixed, we ended up making $60K in that sale. And that $60K went directly into the down payment of the new place. And I don't know how much that's going to happen anymore. The prices have largely stabilized. I checked in on this place, on the Z estimate or whatever, just to kind of get an idea of like what it might be worth now, like, because I want to see where house prices have been since I started, being in the, I guess being a homeowner. And, the answer is significant. So, I'm looking at the tax record for the house now, just to kind of refresh my memory here. But when we purchased the house, we bought in 2013. It was $168,000, and and that was significantly discounted from, he listed it for $225,000, and we were able to get him down to $168,000. We sold the house in 2018 for $265,000. So I was wrong. It was almost $100K. Like it's dumped into the next house. What the Z estimate is now for the house, it's been going up and down in this area a little bit, but it's hovering around $400,000 now. It's not that big of a house. The lot is like 9,000 square feet. It's in a neighborhood where everybody's right up on top of each other. I don't know, man. It's wild. So like I do feel for guys that are out there trying to make it work. So the housing thing is probably going to be the biggest hurdle that you need to overcome. But again, what are the things that you can do personally? What are the ways that you can start making small changes to be able to do the things that you want to do, whether it's get a house or, move out to the sticks and put a trailer on a piece of land, that sort of thing. And these are all like viable options. Like work from home now has kind of changed the game too. But let's talk about the financial order of operations, because this is where like a lot of guys get stunlocked. There's people want to talk about, I want to start a business and buy real estate and, I want investment properties and, I want to be a millionaire. That's what it all comes down to. It's always, I want to be a millionaire. Yes. But do you have significant credit card debt? Do you have emergency reserves? Do you, have you, worked to cover your insurance? Are you covered in case you have like some significant medical bills that materialize, if there's an accident or something? Do you have insurance in case, you get into a car accident and you end up being at fault for some reason? Guys get real down the primrose path of daydreams without thinking about the tangible things they need to be doing. And so the first thing, people need to do is they need to understand exactly where every single dollar they spend is going. Now, it sounds like a big chore. It sounds like, well, what's the point? It sounds like something you already kind of know off the top of your head. I think doing a real audit of your finances is kind of the first step, specifically with what you bring home. Like if you look at your pay stub, you'll see what your gross is. Your gross is what you make. That's what you tell people, right? You don't talk about, your new job to your friends and say like, I'm making 85,000 gross, 53 after taxes. No one really brags about what they're making, like after taxes, expenses, payroll, 401k contributions. So looking at your pay stub, looking at your taxes from, the years prior, you need to familiarize yourself with what your actual income is, because your net is what is going into your account. And that is what you have to play with, right? Your gross, government's going to take it. You need to be probably maxing out whatever the employer match is on whatever the employee contribution retirement accounts are. But you need to pay attention to what the real number of income is that you have. And the second thing is you need to be able to account for the dollars that you're spending. Part of that is like, there's a biblical call to it, right? You being a good steward of the time and treasure that God has given you. Because every single dollar that you have, that you make, is a reflection of the time that you've put into something that's generated that money. You give an accounting to yourself and to God for what you did with that time and with the resources that were given to you. Just today, the whole discussion about the $20 burrito, I was like, well, it's been quite some time since I looked at my expenses. And one of the ones that we have, some of our family stuff is set up for auto pay. It is entirely automatic in how it goes out. And if it's automatic, that means I don't look at it because I don't need to. It's automatic. Except the problem is if you change something and it's automatic and you don't change it back or review it later on, you kind of end up screwed. So I took a trip a few years ago internationally. I turned on a monthly international phone plan so that I could maintain contact with my employer and my family and the people that were watching my kids while me and my wife were globetrotting a little bit. 10th anniversary, we're going to do a big trip. It was great. I had a great time. The phone worked amazing. Like, who knew you could get American cell phone coverage down in the French Riviera? It was beautiful. Truly a miracle of the modern world. However, it's $100 a month. And that trip was 3 years ago. And I forgot to turn the international phone plan off. I just never looked at it because it was automatic. And so Verizon has strangled thousands of dollars out of me over the course of a few years because I was careless and not a good steward of my time or my treasure. And so, people need to be careful. I'm in a position where, frankly, it's not really affecting me. I didn't have to look. I wasn't in a position where I really missed that $100 a month. Other guys, that $100 a month is a big game changer for them and what they're able to do. And so you need to be able to review realistically your incomes and your expenses and give an accounting and fully understand what are needs, what are, things that you enjoy, and then what are things that are just kind of nonsensical that nobody needs, like an international phone plan if you only travel internationally once every few years. The second thing is, once you have an idea of what your reasonable budget is, right? You gotta have to there are practical steps. And this is the part where everyone wigs out at people telling them, giving them practical advice, right? There is a skill to shopping. There is. That's one of the reasons women are great at bargain bin hunting. Like, for example, I think for, the multiple children that I have over the course of 10 years, we have maybe spent a total of like $3,000 to $5,000 on clothing and like toys for all of my kids. And that is because we, the women's Bible study, as everyone's giving each other hand-me-downs. Our local area has a big consignment sale once a year or twice a year where, they have an entire warehouse of tables with vendors out there just doing nothing but selling consignment kids' clothing and toys and books and activities. So there's lots of ways to save money. However, I would have not ever thought to do that. I would have not gone onto the community Facebook page and found the consignment festival or whatever it is, because I just don't think that way. But my wife did. So there is a skill to shopping. It's not just going into whatever your grocery store is. If you're strapped for cash and you're going into Trader Joe's, you're probably not looking for a deal. So if people tell you, hey, here's tangible ways that you could probably save money, it's probably not meant to be insulting. And the truth is that if you find it somewhat insulting, it might be kind of pinching a nerve a little bit, because you're not really trying as hard as you could. If you're meal prepping instead of ordering out every night, you're not spending needless money on vices like, cigarettes or alcohol or Zyn or whatever. Like, you don't need the patches. Like, it'd be great to have every once in a while, pouches. If you're not spending good money over bad on nonsense and you're being responsible, trying to find bargains, couponing where appropriate, I don't know. You're doing great. Maybe you don't need that. Well, who am I kidding? You need the Days Vault pin. But the Days Vault pin we can include in your budget. It's an essential. It's fine. I'm sure there's other ways that we can cut, though. And that's the biggest part, I think, is advocating for an honest approach to your own personal finances. You just got to be honest with yourself. So who's gonna make it and who's not gonna make it? What is any of this? Who will be left and what will be left of them? This was an interesting one. Bombadom, whom I really like. I enjoy his writing style, but he says Gen Z doesn't embrace the ramen noodle lifestyle like Gen X, and why would they? What are the driving forces that would motivate a young person to grind as hard as possible and live as frugally as possible to attain status? In the secular society that we have, these motivators are housing and relationships and consumerism. The problem is all these motivators have been systematically ripped away from 90% of young men. Ramen noodle lifestyle won't bridge the gap of homes skyrocketing in price. You can eat as much ramen as you want, but it won't allow you to save $600,000 for a mortgage at 7%. Ramen noodle lifestyles won't stop mass institutional discrimination against young white men in this country. I can eat all the ramen I want. That won't stop some HR girl boss from auto declining my application because I have an American name on it. Ramen noodle lifestyle won't de-radicalize and demedicate young women in America. Exactly how many ramen packets do I need to go through before I unlock access to girls that aren't insane psycho kill-all men liberal freaks and aren't on debilitating combinations of Zoloft and Lexapro? The reality is that almost every way of life beyond frivolous consumer spending, upward mobility has been ripped from 90% of young people. Now all they have left is buying video games, which are worse now than they were 10 years ago, and random slop bowls. And I think he's got a point. As much as it pains me to admit, it does seem like it seems hard. I have steps. I have things you can do. I have tangible action items, and I've offered myself. If you're a guy in our circle and you're vetted, and people vouch for you, I'm happy to communicate with you directly and do some coaching. If you have questions about setting up a budget or getting started with an investment account, and what should I be doing? Should I Roth or traditional IRAs? Should I have enough for my kids? Should I max out my 401k contributions? Like, can you help me understand this loan document or the terms on this sheet? I'm happy to do that for people. But the question is why? Bumbadum says, there's not really a big reason. There's not really a hope of social contribution. There's no buy-in from culture writ large. And I think he's right to a certain extent. But I think the most lamentable thing is that it doesn't matter that he's right. It doesn't. We're going to need guys that push. And I think we're at a point where it's a filter. I've gotten, I'm in the position where I'm putting the final editing touches on a very long article about rites of passage being destroyed, and how we are now in a culture that has the concept of emergent adulthood. Perpetual adolescence is probably a better name for it. But it's, if you don't have rites of passage into adulthood, the idea of separation and sacrifice and trial and reintegration with society, if you don't go through hard times and come out different, if you're unable to sacrifice something of yourself to build something better, either within yourself or in your own life or with another person, and in new life that can come from marriage, there's an argument to be made that you're not an adult. You're just a kid, a perpetual child. And I think our society is filled with perpetual children. People who have gotten lulled into habituated comfort, who've, their entire identities are wrapped around brand affiliation and consumption. There's not much left to, motivate them, really. Like, any employment they have, any job they have, any money they save, the only real purpose they have for it that they see in their immediate future is it's just going to fund some dopamine, loop, some brand, some streamer, some product, some Pokemon card, something. And it's a lamentable thing. But our guys are smart. Most of anyone that reads me or listens to me is probably a Christian. So we have a deontology that requires us to work. We have a deontology that requires us to be good stewards, to be shrewd, to recognize the seasons that we're in. And this is a season of malaise. It's a season of calm before the storm. Like, everyone knows that there's something on the horizon. They can't really identify what it is. It's murky and it's pixelated and it's hidden behind something. But we know over the hill, over the rise, in the direction of the setting sun, there is something big on the horizon. And everyone is scared. Everyone is kind of nervous. We know that there's a period of transition that's happening at a global level. And what that materially looks like in our daily lives, how does that affect us? Is it some sort of political revolution? Is it some sort of violence or war? Is it economic collapse? Or is it AI driving us back to the Stone Age? Is it like everyone loses their job to AGI and we have to come up with some UBI that gets me in a bread line with a bunch of foreigners that don't speak any English, and I just want to kill myself because the Odyssey sucked? No. You can't be stun locked by the hypotheticals of the future. all you can really do is try to manifest the life you want, through maintaining, or through hyper focusing on the actions that you can take to better yourself, to become the person that you want to be, whether that's lifting or making more money, or you're finally going to put in those job applications. You're going to reach out to some guys within your network and say, like, hey, these are my skills. Can you set me up? Can you help me write a resume? Can you help me get my name out there? Do you know anyone that's hiring in this kind of thing? Hey, where should I move to have the best chance of a career? Do you know any employers in that area? Hey, I'm like out of potential girls that I can talk to at my church or in this town. And I'm thinking of like packing up and trying to go on an adventure and seeing if there's, if the grass is greener out there somewhere, because I'm young and I don't really have any responsibilities right now. The only purpose of my job is to fund my checking account so I can spend, and nothing is really materializing for me. So I think adventure is what I need. I need to go do something so I can come back refreshed and feel like there's more to existence than consumption. So that's kind of what I don't know. If you're interested in things that can tangibly make your life incrementally better, I think focusing on, finances and how to cultivating skills, cultivating credentials, these are all positive things. On the income side, like I said, there's ways you can go about doing it. If your company offers college reimbursement for classes, and you have a local college that you can do it on the cheap, take advantage of every opportunity you have through whatever employer you're at to pursue stuff where you can get degrees, or you can get credentials or certifications or skills, letters of recommendation, and then try to leverage that into increased income through networking, through self-promotion. Sometimes LinkedIn works. And on the expense side, like I said, it's just about having a realistic understanding of exactly what money comes in and what money goes out, being able to render an accounting for that. And if you ever, need help understanding kind of individual financial concepts or personal financial concepts, talk to someone like me. I wouldn't recommend most people go out and hire a quote financial advisor. Unfortunately, the term financial advisor almost universally means someone who wants to sell you life insurance now. And if you're a single guy, with limited kids or no kids, no family really, that depends on you, life insurance is not within the scope of your priorities at all. There's other things we need to take care of first. So just find guys that you trust to give you good advice and rely on them. Don't pay someone to manage your money for you. I think that's about it. I didn't really have, like I said, I didn't have much of an outline today. So it was a little bit off the cuff. So I apologize for that. But I thought this one was funny. A lot of people on the right complaining about grocery prices and the cost of living are also the biggest defenders of global tariffs and import controls that have been imposed by this presidential administration. But they won't bring those up lest they lose access. It's like, we grow our food here, man, or at least we should. There was one video of JD Vance. Someone said that he was there was crap. Give me a second. There was one video that went around where he was talking about affordability, and I wanted to see if it was worth watching, but I lost it. Dang. I hate the timeline stuff, man. It's like, it's so useless. Oh, yeah, here it is. Okay. Let me pull this up real quick.
up to like 42 years of age. 10, 15 years ago, it was much lower. There's concern about the cost of living, still high energy prices, $100 to fill my tank today. What does the Republican Party, specifically the administration, need to do better on that front? Because there are real strains out there.
Well, I think that what it shows is that the past 40 years of economic policy, bipartisan economic policy, have failed. I think a lot of people look at El Sayed or a lot of these other radical candidates and they say socialism's evil. They're right. Socialism is evil. But we have to ask ourselves the question, why is socialism so appealing to a lot of people who, to your point, have lower assets, who don't have the same ownership, who went to universities and were sold a bill of goods? They got a lot of debt, but they didn't necessarily get the good jobs that came along with that high debt load. And I think our answer to that, and by the way, you've already seen a lot of it in the Trump administration, is number one, protect American manufacturing. The manufacturing economy is the foundation of the middle class. We see this in Europe. We saw it in the United States. Every country that sells its industrial base to the highest foreign bidder loses its middle class and sees socialism come on the back end. What I think is actually going to happen is these socialist candidates, they've caught the tail end of an economy that wasn't working for most Americans. Unfortunately for them, the Trump economy has made long-term investments in rebuilding that manufacturing base and making America energy independent and actually making it possible to own a home, to have a family, to build the real elements of middle-class life again.
Manufacturing.
Yeah, that was pretty good, I guess. To be, completely honest, it might be interesting actually to see if I have this pulled up. My macroeconomic thesis in my own investment portfolio is primarily. Do I have it here? No. I invested in a macroeconomic thesis of American reindustrialization and the underlying inputs that would require, as well as agricultural inputs. So my biggest performers this year have been a steel company, American Steel Company, John Deere tractors. I have a couple of chemical companies that specialize in agrochemicals. And so that was kind of what I was focusing on, because the war in Ukraine has stopped, has caused some problems with the agricultural verticals. China was putting limitations on steel and chemical exports, especially nitrogen-based fertilizer exports. So there has been significant capital flows into those markets. So that's kind of what I was looking at. This isn't financial advice. I'm not your financial advisor. I am not a fiduciary. I'm not giving you individuated advice in this live stream. There's my caveats, but that's what I was interested in. But something to just kind of pay attention to, if you want to get started with some of this stuff, with investing, with playing around with stocks, there's ways to do it where you can do it as a game and not really worry about losing money. You can get on Coifin, or there's other like test platforms. I think Webull has one, but it requires you to open an account. So you can open like a brokerage with Webull for like $50, and they will give you effectively a test platform where you can buy and sell stocks that you like, and figure out how the market kind of works, figure out what all the nomenclature is, rely on AI and Investopedia, and, just play with it, gamify it for yourself instead of logging on and playing Pal World or whatever. You can go through and just play with different things that are happening within the market and getting a better idea of it. So this is kind of one of the screens that I look at with my personal watch list. And this, it says free up here. This is a free Coifin account. But a lot of the stuff down here, the energy has been fluctuating, but it's performing consistently well because of the war in Iran. Uranium is down. That was one of my bets last year, was uranium, because they were talking about capital inflows towards rebuilding nuclear power plants, to house for the AI and that sort of thing. There was a lot of small scale nuclear power plant projects that were getting launched. Financial market is doing pretty well as interest rates kind of stay high. Healthcare and consumer staples are good. They're solid. medium performing investments. You're not gonna get rich doing that, but it is somewhat of a hedge against market volatility. And then my rare earth stuff has been an utter disaster. Gold, I'm down significantly in gold and silver. I got wiped out in April, but I'm hanging on to them because we'll see what happens. I guess sunk cost fallacy. Bonds are stable. They're not really doing anything. Tesla's up and down. Tesla's all about option plays. Don't play in Tesla unless you know what you're doing. Bitcoin is still crap. What happened to Bitcoin, man? It's just gone. And then I have some, there was an interesting study that JP Morgan did a few years back when I was getting some of my credentials done in finance. There was, they adjusted market performing portfolios, like balanced portfolios or aggressive growth portfolios that were specifically within just equities or a mix of equities and bonds or equities and fixed income assets. And then they showed performance if they added REITs. And not all REITs are the same. A lot of it is, some of them are dedicated to like a specific kind of tenant. Like I believe Simon Property Group is one that's corporate, mostly East Coast corporate warehousing and office space. There's O, which is a blend of residential as well as corporate realty. There's a couple more there's one that was like just pharmacy real estate, and that one tanked because all the CVS or the Rite Aids all went out of business, and CVS is not doing great. And all the Walgreens and CVS's have like deodorant and cocoa butter like locked up for some reason. But these are the things like you just kind of play around with until you get it. And the truth is that you're probably not going to want to day trade. You probably just want to pick low income index funds like Triple Q. So if we look at one of the most used funds is QQQ. What QQQ is an S&P index fund. It's a weighted index fund. The other one is SPY, and what SPY is it's the entire S&P 500 Standard & Poor 500 ETF. It's the top 500 capitalized positions in the market, in the American market, the S&P 500. And I believe there's like some weighting. And by weighting, I mean it's not like you own one share of everything. There's like a percentage of ownership within primarily FANG and like big tech stuff. But yeah, I don't know. This stuff I kind of find interesting. Not particularly helpful from guys that are somewhere else within. If you're still here, if you're like stage 6 within your financial order of operations, you're finally working to max out your retirements. You have enough excess cash to contribute to your max out your Roth, and you're doing you have your employer match covered, your emergency reserves, 3-4 months of expenses in a savings account just sitting there that you're not going to touch ever. Once you get to that point and you're squirreling away money in a brokerage account, then you can start doing the day trading. But if that's something you aspire to, come up with a plan for your budget, figure out a way to maximize your income, minimize your expenses. Do everything you can to focus on those two buckets first, with ultimate plan for investment and hyperaccumulation within discretionary investment accounts. Then you can start doing the private business deals or real estate deals. You can buy rental properties and that sort of thing. But that's way out there. So until then, focus on what you have control over. I think that's going to be it for me. I don't know. Let me know if this was helpful at all. Again, just top of the dome. But you can't say that that old Paca didn't try. Anyway, for PacaCast, I'm Baba Alpaca, hoping you have all the financial success in the world. Good night.